Now, this illustration deals with dissipation into the ambient media in accordance with NEC 310.14A3, informational note, item number 3. Now, let's review a couple things here before we get started. Note 1, if the terminals are not all 75 degrees C in the circuit, or 60 degrees C ampacities must be used in accordance with 310.16. And notice figure 14-16 illustrates this in detail. Now, note 2, if overcurrent protection device and equipment is rated 100 amps or less, if the equipment is marked 60/75 or 75 degrees C, ampacities in the 75 degree column, in accordance with table 310.16, shall be permitted to be used. So we can very well see by 110.14C, 1A or 1B, that if the overcurrent device is 100 amps or less, it's automatically 60 degrees C terminals. Without the circuit breaker or the equipment is marked 60/75. Well, with the 60 degrees C marking there, you can cable. All cables are 60 degrees C unless otherwise marked for 75 degrees C. This is well illustrated in section 334.80 in the NEC. It's so simply identified there and outlined that even I think a child could understand it reading it. It's that clear. So read that so that you get a good feel that I can take a 90-degree conductor as a designer or installer and use that 90 degree to derate back to a usable 60 or 75. Now that is fully illustrated to us in 110.14C as in car, as well as 334.80 in the NEC. If the overcurrent device is over 100 amp, then it's automatically 75 degree C terminals. If the devices are marked 75, state, county, city inspectors know that this is a raceway system with individual conductors, and cables would not be used at all without they are listed at 75 degrees, such as service entrance cable. But AC cable, most MC cable, non-metallic sheath cable, no, those cables are 60 degrees C if you follow through the code in 334.80 for non-metallic sheath cable, 320.80 for AC cable, etc. We can pick up those rules. Now, with this thought in mind, read the very top of the illustration, and all conductors are THWN and run in conduit. Let's look at circuit number 1. The overcurrent device is 100 amps or less in rating. So we're going to review 110.14C1A for 100 amp device or less, and notice they're 60 degrees C. They're not marked 60/75 or 75 as in note 2. We go to the equipment, and the equipment is marked 60 degrees C. So that means the ampacity has to be selected from the 60 degree column in table 310.16. Now, when we review 110.14C1A, we talk about conductor sizes number 14 through number 1. And why is that? Well, if you review the 60 degree column in table 310.16, it takes a number 1 conductor to provide 100 amps if you're terminating your conductors to 60 degrees C terminals. If you happen to have a 75 degree C terminals, then notice I could use a number 3 that's good for 100 amp. So that's why number 14 through number 1 are listed in 110.14 C1A. Now let's review the next circuit below it, circuit number 2. Over 100 amp, automatically 75 degree C terminals. The terminals at the equipment is also 75 degrees C. So table 310.16, we can use the 75 degree C terminals there, and we can use a larger conductor than number 1, like 1 aught, 2 aught, 3 aught, and so forth, by this section and by the authority having jurisdiction's approval. Now let's look at circuit number 3. The devices say they're rated 75 degrees C, but we have a 60 degrees C termination for the equipment. Now that circuit would have to be rated at 60 degrees C because the terminals in the equipment and the terminals at the service equipment are not matched up at 75 degrees C or 60/75 degrees C. We have that 60 degrees C terminal at the equipment, which determines the ampacity would be selected from the 60 degrees C column where the overcurrent devices are rated at 100 amps or less in accordance with 110.14 C1 little a. We would use 110.14 C1 little b where the overcurrent devices are rated over 100 amp. So figure 8-4 is illustrating a lot of information here identifying the dissipation into ambient media of the overheated conductors due to improperly connecting to a terminal not rated for that ampacity in accordance with 310.14 A3 Informational Note 1, item number 3.